Okay, so it's now my pleasure to transition us to the next formidable panel of presenters that we have with us. Uh, I'll firstly introduce Danielle Sands. Danielle, who is a member of the board of directors of Realize, is Cree, French, and English, proudly two-spirit, non-binary, and openly gay. They are intergenerational residential school survivors and a cancer survivor. Danielle is living with HIV and neurodiverse, including ADHD. They have experiences with homelessness, substance use, housing insecurity, poverty, being bullied, sexual and physical abuse, mental illness, challenges with depression, anxiety, and suicide. Danielle is a thriving and independent human person who uses a manual wheelchair, and that wheelchair has a special name. Her name is Diva because she doesn't do stairs. She likes bathrooms she can turn around in, and she also helps Danielle self-advocate for accessibility. Heather McCain, who identifies the pronouns as they and them, is the founder and executive director of Creating Accessible Neighborhoods, a nonprofit they started in 2005. Heather built CAN from a small grassroots organization to an organization delivering workshops and adding their voice to projects and events across Turtle Island. Heather works on the stolen land of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh in what is colonially called Vancouver. Heather's own experience with multiple types of disabilities, neurodivergence, inaccessibility, and ableism led them to become a well-known and respected advocate, speaker, and educator who works to create equity, celebrate diversity, and educate about and implement accessibility. We round the panel off with Don Turner. Don comes from a background of Blackfeet Nation ancestry and Black Canadian ancestry. His life journey has led him to embrace his Aboriginal spirituality. Don identifies himself as two-spirited and is living with HIV for the last 30 years. Being a long-term survivor, he realized that sharing his life's journey really helps others. Donald has been trained as a medicine wheel facilitator as well as in other healing modalities. And I've only shared just a tidbit of each presenter's bio with you. And as with the previous panel, we'll use the same format. Each person will have a 10-minute window of time to share their lived and living experiences. Again, we'll have the countdown clock, and we'll also give a little verbal reminder, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So, Danielle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tammy. And I am so pumped. The previous speakers, yeah, it's so exciting. I'm really pumped. Sorry to the translators. With my ADHD, when I get really excited, I can just talk super fast. I'm trying to slow it down. Yeah, so pumped. Thank you, Lisa, Jade, Lisa, Rabia, Matthew. Yeah, so pumped. I love the solidarity, and yeah, as a self advocate, sometimes I feel like I'm pushing the giant rock up the hill all by myself, and then the solidarity comes in. It's like, oh yes, I'm not doing it all by myself. We're doing a lot of stuff. Sometimes you don't see it, right? And at the same time, I don't see my impact, until I get like feedback or something. But yeah, super pumped, super pumped. This is so awesome. Um, yeah, just want to acknowledge the territory that I'm on. I'm on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. also known as Victoria, BC. Um, yeah, wow. Such great speakers. I'm so excited. This is really great. Um, yeah, so I wanted to talk about sort of my experiences with a disability and working. Like years ago, I was working like in restaurants and construction, very physical heavy employment. And then when I was diagnosed in September 2015 with cancer and HIV, which and actually AIDS at the time, um, everything sort of changed, right? There was changes in my body. I after chemo and radiation, I developed asthma and in the subsequent years, needing a cane, needing a walker, and now using a super fabulous wheelchair named Diva. Um, Things changed, and once the brain fog cloud kind of dispersed after chemo, I started to sort of come back into myself and, oh, well, now what do I do? I'm not going to go, I would love to actually go back into construction using a wheelchair and going in and, people will be like, oh my God, there's someone in there using a wheelchair in construction. What? Um, but it wasn't my love, let's say. Um, but I wanted to start giving back and started working, and I really appreciated the comment about all people with disabilities want to work. I love that. Like, it gives me purpose, and it gives me drive, and it also about the anger. I can, the anger and the frustration, I can funnel that in a healthy way into my work and driving my advocacy and, you know, going to the manager or going to the above the manager or saying like, let me speak to your supervisor. I've learned also that people are always ready to learn when I'm ready to teach. But that, like, that anger and stuff really is can be a really healthy way to you know fuel my advocacy. Um, and yeah, so I, sort of learned what a peer was, like a peer role, um, and how, it started with like one peer role. And for someone who, if you don't know, a peer is somebody with lived or living experience. And, through my peer work, um, at first I was kind of like, I'm not qualified to talk about this. And everyone's like, yeah, you are qualified. You are living with, these are your lived experiences. These are all valuable. Um, I know when I was sleeping outside, I never thought that sleeping outside would actually, those challenges of sleeping outside or challenges of living with substance use would actually be qualifications for a peer job. It sort of changed my idea. Um, of qualifications. And now I say I have a master's degree in Daniel Sands because I'm an expert in my own experiences. And um, I am enough. That I have a friend who has a tattoo on their arm that says I am enough. And that often pops into my head that, yeah, I'm enough. I am an absolute expert in my experiences, and I am, you know, a great communicator that I can express my challenges and how to make systems different. Like, people always say, oh, let's think outside the box. And actually, I live outside the box. I've lived outside the box my entire life, being two-spirit, being gay, being trans non-binary, like all of these things. I live outside the box. So um, it's easy for me to think outside the box because I see the way that these systems are, and they've never really identified to me. They've never really fit me. So I'm always trying to figure a way, innovatively thinking of how to fix them. And just like they said, the simplest is often the most effective. And yeah, it's like, this system doesn't work. Well, let's change it. And if you've been living in that system and supported by that system and privileged by that system, you may not see that you can change it. And that's, I mean, I just said this yesterday about a system, um, like a healthcare system and a government system, stuff like that. That, well, a human made these systems, a human can unmake these systems, or a human can alter these systems so that they're better for everybody. And that's the value of being a peer, is that, you know, um, I am using these systems and I see how they can be better. Right. I was just talking to a ministry worker, a provincial ministry worker of social development and poverty reduction, about how the system can be better for me. And she was like, "These are great ideas. I wish I could change them." And I said, "Yeah, we can change them." I mean, she couldn't. Maybe that wasn't her job, but it's all of our jobs to challenge the systems and make them better. And yes, it's exhausting. um, there are also, I just want to say, some dangers of being a peer as well. That Nobody really teaches you how to be a peer, right? Someone says, "Oh, you have some lived experience. Please come talk to us. We'd be happy to hear." And there's also sometimes there's hidden sort of dangers in that. Tokenism is big, where, oh well, we have, one person who has a visible disability on our panel, so we're good. We've ticked the box. And that tokenism can be very dangerous, because it gives that sense, it gives the organizers a sense of, oh, we've done our job, tick a box, we're good. Another danger is cheap labor. I've done things as a peer that, if I had the qualifications and the degrees, I would be getting 5 times as much pay, when I'm kind of getting cheap labor, used as cheap labor. Um, Another thing is, like, not being acknowledged for our suggestions and our expertise, in the way that I can, say, "Hey, let's fix this system," but I don't get recognition for that. Somebody who is the supervisor or the boss says, "Oh, look what we've done. We are so good. We've changed the system to be inclusive, or to be, accessible," but they don't give the accolades or the acknowledgement to the actual people. But peers have been, yeah. There's just, yeah, so much to talk about. Um, but peer is a really valuable role, and our voices sometimes can be much more important than um, the folks who have the privilege to, who are at the top, or who have the privilege. Yet often we're the, like, least heard. So yeah, I just want to invite everybody to, think about peers, and use peers, and pay peers. Pay peers what you would pay somebody with a degree, or, somebody who has those, like, qualifications. I often say, like, you can learn about homelessness from a book all you want, but unless you've slept outside, um, you're not going to have the same kind of impact. I actually suggested that to some medical students once who were doing some outreach, and I said, "Well, have you ever been homeless?" And they were both like, "No." I said, "Well, take your sleeping bag, go out, sleep outside for a couple nights. Don't shower, don't bring an alarm clock, don't bring your phone, and just start to see how people start to react to you if you haven't showered, or you're carrying a backpack with a sleeping bag." And they were just like, minds blown. Oh my gosh, I never would have thought of that. And they were going to be working with people who are experiencing homelessness. So, stuff like that can be, really powerful. I also had a campaign called Roll a Mile in My Wheels, where I asked people at the city hall to find a wheelchair and go around the city for a little bit, see how you go. And a couple counselors, or a couple managers did, and they found it very enlightening. Just to get a glimpse, a smidge, a little tiny glimpse of what it's like to use a wheelchair around Victoria. So yeah, thanks so much. My time is done, but I am still not done talking.
Thanks
I
so
as
much,
well.
Danielle.
I as
Well
well could talk
done.
forever.
And we could listen to you for forever. And I did
Thanks.
not know I had another master's degree, the master's degree of Tammy Yates Rajaduri. I love that. I love that. And it's it's one of those aha moments. Thank you so much, Danielle. Okay, so Heather, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I'm going to share some slides. So as shared, I'm Heather McKean from Creating Accessible Neighborhoods. I'm a white non-binary person who has silver glasses, freckles, and a shaved head. I'm in my home office with a wall of my photos behind me and my cat's in a box on my bed. This slide has a photograph of sunlight filtering through trees at Seymour Provincial Park. I do these visual descriptions to ensure that partially sighted and blind people have access to visual information, just as I will describe any other images on the slides. And if I don't describe an image, then the slide is white with orange and sometimes black accents. So I come to you today from the stolen land of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. This acknowledgement is a tiny piece in the larger context of the ongoing work that must be done to create disruptive change and true reconciliation and challenge the legacies of colonialism, including our inherent ableism. My organization, Creating Accessible Neighborhoods, was founded following my personal experiences with ableism and inaccessibility. I used a power wheelchair at the time. I'm shown on this slide in my wheelchair at a bus stop next to a bus. Bus drivers would lie and tell me that the ramps weren't operating because they didn't want to take the time to load and unload passengers with disabilities, thus acting as gatekeepers and denying me access. I wrote letter after letter to the local transit authority with no response. I attempted to find an organization to support me and had no luck there. So in 2000, so somebody actually joked to me that I should start my own organization. And in 2005, I founded CAN. I wrote the same letter that I had been writing, but this time with executive director under my name. And I received a response a week later. I was able to resolve the issue, news spread, and CAN was inundated with disabled people with other access issues. 17 years later, and we are still trying to address those issues. So all of CAN's members live with multiple intersecting identities, which are not properly acknowledged or represented. They often have to divide themselves to reduce the discrimination that they encounter. CAN recognizes, appreciates, and honors the whole person. We center decolonization and use both an intersectional lens and a disability justice framework. We're committed to educating others just as we are committed to educating ourselves. Part of how we educate others is through our workshops on accessibility protocols, breaking barriers, disability awareness, disability justice, gender and sexuality, imposter syndrome, queer and trans history, and our latest, which we launch next week, called CRIP Kindness. The systems and structures that support disabled people have failed us. As such, disabled people have developed ways of being together and supporting each other while recognizing people's inherent worth and valuing what each individual has to offer. So the CRIP Kindness talks about how to apply this community care to everyday life. This slide has a photograph of participants listening and taking notes at one of our workshops at a conference. So for too long, disabled 2S LGBTQIA+ people have been made to feel like they don't belong. Workplaces and community spaces actively work against diversity by not having policies that protect against discrimination or support diverse staff. Our members have a hard time finding work and or being themselves in a work environment, and the majority of our members live under the poverty line. So part of how I gain access to spaces has been by re-traumatizing myself again and again. I go into environments that are actively hostile to me, including inaccessible locations, insulting interpersonal interactions, lack of representation, bias, microaggressions, and larger aggressions like being isolated. So for example, I was part of a conference where no one would sit with me because I was in a wheelchair. I have had to fight to speak, to be heard, and for my words to be respected. It was and remains exhausting. I attended one equity and diversity conference that was actively hostile to me and others. Unfortunately, many civil rights and equity conversations leave out disabled people and accessibility, and this needs to change. I wrote a letter following the conference, and in it I said, I am continually put into the situation of advocating for accommodations that were already promised to me. Many folks are unable or uncomfortable speaking up. We shouldn't have to make a decision to advocate for ourselves or experience discomfort. I was emotionally spent by the end of the day. I spent so much time and energy making the space equitable to me or dealing with the inaccessibility, educating the facilitators and other participants, and doing other emotional work stemming from the non-inclusive environment that I really did not have a lot left to take in the information, remember the content and conversations, and be able to have meaningful participation. This emotional labor is particularly hurtful because not everyone has the capacity to have it on their shoulders. It is the reason so many people from oppressed populations don't participate. They don't want the weight of their community put on them when they are there to learn, grow, and be an active participant. I know many people with disabilities who would love to attend workshops for the valuable materials, information, and connections, but they do not attend because they don't have the energy to deal with everything I had to deal with for this particular workshop. I have also experienced tokenism, the practice of making an empty symbolic gesture to avoid criticism and appease people. Tokenism isolates people and forces them to interact with unsupportive and actively hostile environments. People who are tokenized are often feel pressured to represent or educate their entire community, which is a heavy weight to carry and often leads to frustration, exhaustion, and burnout. For example, I once sat on a board for a disability organization. When I started, I used a power wheelchair. By my second year, I was using a walker, and if I was dropped off at the door, I could walk into the meetings. One day, I overheard two board members discussing me. They were asking what was the point of having me on the board anymore when I didn't appear disabled in the company photos. This not only speaks to tokenism that marginalizes folks, but also the added misperceptions about people with non-evident disabilities who often have to fight to be recognized as disabled. Another example of tokenism is when a board finds someone with multiple intersecting identities, like myself, who is queer, trans, asexual, which means I don't experience sexual attraction, aromantic, which means I don't experience romantic attraction, neurodivergent, and disabled, and feel that one person can represent all those identities and they need to find no other diversity. And then there are the perspectives and parameters around professionalism and good behavior. These terms are used to gatekeep positions of power, instill imposter syndrome, and tell marginalized people that they are not wanted in these spaces. Imposter syndrome is feeling inadequate, like a fraud, and like you aren't qualified to do the work. It comes from internalized messages that we don't always realize we are taking in. And part of these messages is what is considered quote unquote professional. It's important to challenge thoughts and biases about what is deemed professionalism and good behavior, ask who sets these parameters and who is most negatively impacted. Often what is often considered unprofessional or bad behavior is what disabled people need to do in order to have their access needs met. The following are just a few examples of when I've been told that my behavior was unacceptable or unprofessional. So wearing sunglasses inside because I had a migraine, playing solitaire on my phone during meetings because I am on medications that make me sleepy, and doing a game helps me stay awake and able to focus. Not engaging in eye contact because I experience a negative physiological response that is stressful and overwhelming. Using an audible alarm to remind me to take medications, having to read from a script instead of memorizing my talks because my memory is impaired by medications and post-traumatic stress disorder. And using STEM toys when I am overstimulated. STEM toys are self-stimulating objects that people who are over or understimulated can use to be more grounded and present and less anxious. What is ironic is a lot of my stress and anxiety is created by the environments and people that I am forced to interact with. Then they punish me when I try to care for myself and self-regulate by using STEM toys. This slide has blocks with the colors of the rainbow at the top and the blocks of trans colors, pink, white, and blue at the bottom. As a queer trans person, I have been told I am unprofessional for wearing shirts that represent to us LGBTQIA plus people, having a rainbow flag on my wheelchair. I was told I wasn't in a pride parade and it wasn't professional to show it in a meeting. And talking about my experiences as an asexual and aromantic person in a conference on sexuality, even though those other sexual orientations and identities were discussed, I was shamed for being open about my identities. I'll finish with this thought. All too often, people compliment disabled people on their resiliency. This is not a compliment. Disabled people and those from other marginalized identities shouldn't have to be as resilient as our systems and structures force us to be. As Andasha L'Oreella Brown says in her tweet shown on this slide, I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I am exhausted by strength. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or for how many. We need to do better as individuals and as part of the systems, structures, supports that surround us all to work towards a day when disabled people and other marginalized folk aren't forced into being so resilient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I believe me, I feel and hear exactly what you showed on that last slide. Thank you so much for ending on that note. Over to you, Don. The floor is all yours.
Okay, the floor is all yours. All right, I'm moving. I live at Chatham, Kent today is a traditional land of the Three Fires Confederation, the Oneida, the Potawatomi, and the Ojibwe. These are the nations that are known in Anishinaabe and Lenape, agreed to mutual share this land that we have. When I do acknowledgement of the land, I try to get people to acknowledge the land that they live on and why are they thankful, which is part of the TRC. People taking the responsibility is about acknowledgement that they are here and we all are stewards of this land. I have candles. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a candle here that I light every time I do these talks. And I was listening to Daniel earlier, is about a drum that he made, and I just want to share with him. This is one of the drums that I use when I do medicines, or when I look at I'm hurting or I have a lot of pain or anger. I just get my drum and my rattle out, and I sing and I take part of the universe. I'm really glad to meet my other wheelers here again, and I am in a wheelchair also, and I find it intersectional. I have a number of them, I guess, that being disabled or being handicapped or being physically challenged, not having my limbs, I really felt, I see, people see the chair. They didn't see me. It really, really hurt me. I really believe that by you're not acknowledging me, you're looking at my chair rather than feeling that connection, that humanness. Going to street, look at me oddly. I've been positive for over 30 years. I teach medicine as a facilitator. I like that job because I'm able to help men and help people. I have, as Tammy said earlier, I have my grandfather's from Pt2 from Montana, and he ended moved here in Canada. And then I found out that, wow, black, native,
Hi, Danielle. Donald? Don?
I had high blood pressure.
Don? Are you hearing me? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Uh, your connection is breaking up. Maybe if you turn your video off, we love seeing you, but maybe if you turn your video off just a bit.
Oh, there's, okay,
Would you like to test the audio now, Don? Let me know if you're hearing me. Okay, I see you're trying to rejoin.
Yeah.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Okay, feel free to go ahead, Don.
Okay, but then, yeah, being living in the intersection of being in a wheelchair, this wheelchair is part of me. I had to learn that the hard way, especially when I was in Amsterdam. And being in Amsterdam, I felt that I wasn't going to be able to get around. I didn't want people to depend on me, or I didn't want to depend on them. And then I decided that, okay, I'm still a person. This chair does not define who I am. I have friends that would help me. I look at, I like to help men heal. I like to help people heal. And I found out, now how can I help these people understand me if I don't understand? I'm constantly grieving my loss because I see people able body out there, and they definitely are abusing their legs. And I tell them, I said, how could you do that? So I said, well, listen, why don't you try do what I do from a wheelchair, and we'll have that conversation. And so one of my neighbor's kids said, oh, I can do that, and like tried to act really all tough. He got in a chair and couldn't rake the grass in the backyard. He couldn't take garbage to the burn pile out in the back using the wheelchair, because I try to get people to go be in my shoes and how I have to get around. I drive now. It took me a while, but I had to learn to drive before I could have my independence. When people said that they will help me, I see it in their eyes that they really meant what they said, but it was totally different when it came down, because it felt like I was at their mercy. I had to do things on their time, and I like to go to doctor's appointments early. They're 15, 20 minutes late. And I don't do that lateness very well. I started a men's group here called Dudes, and I really like it, because me in the wheelchair, let the guys see how resilient I was, where I can get in and out of the vehicle. I can drive. And they were just like in awe, like, wow, don't you need help? Well, not to drive. But the nice thing is about they let me be the person that I'm meant to be. And they didn't try to stop me from um, gaining more skills and abilities to move. When I go into a building, I felt very beat up, because nobody held the door open for me. Some of the places weren't wheelchair accessible. A hotel wasn't. They're handicap accessible, but they weren't wheelchair accessible. And I have to tell these people they're two different things. And I sat in one of the hotel rooms, and then again, the washroom wasn't equipped for me to transfer over, because when I went to sit on the bench broke, came right out of the wall. And so I asked them about making a complaint, oh, you don't have to, we have maintenance go up. But I followed through with that, and I literally came home, wrote a letter, and to the company, and they said, "Oh, that has been repaired." Um, I wasn't looking for compensation, but what I was looking for is what would happen to the next person that didn't have the upper body strength as I do. So that really made me be a more strong advocate, not just for myself, but it's for that next person. It's for the next person that's aging, that's in a wheelchair, going to a supermarket. I want to be able to use a cart and shop like everybody else. And then when that cart wasn't there, a friend of mine, Sherry Margulies, and I, we wrote letters like crazy. And then about a month later, guess what? They had a wheelchair for me to go shopping in at the grocery store. And I didn't like the ideas where my friends went and shopped. We left my house together. They went and shopped, and they checked the store to see if they had a cart for me to drive around the store in. They didn't have one. I had to sit in the vehicle and wait for them for an hour and a half, because they went shopping and looking for deals and whatnot. And then I was crushed. I was definitely crushed. I have a lot of family that supports me. I have a lot of friends that support me. I have different organizations. Don, how can we accommodate you? And I tell them, if I bring my own personal wheelchair, I would need a scooter to be able to get around with everybody else, to feel part of that group, or whatever activity that I'm part of. I don't mind taking my own wheelchair. But when I'm there at the hotels or the conference or the workshop, is I want to be able to make it a smooth transition into that community that I'm in, be it Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Amsterdam, Cuba. I want to be able to participate and feel free, just like everybody else, so they can come and go when they want to. I got 2 minutes left. But with all that being said, it's like that intergenerational, the intergenerational, the intersectional of being black and native, black and native. I have to learn to walk or roll in two worlds and respect and honor both worlds. The teachings I get from my elders, Val Nicholson is one of my elders. I look at her, I talk to her, I call her once in a while. If I get lost, and I'm open for the same thing, that same gift she gives me, I give her. And I really like that because that's family and that's connection across Turtle Island. I'm done. I can go on like everybody else says. They can go on forever, but because if I had a key questions or key answers, um, I can really go off. But with the disability of being the intersectional, I find it difficult sometimes, especially because I live rural and we don't have that luxury like in big cities because I live out in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And it truly breaks our heart to have to even give any of you a specific time block because you each have a master's degree in your life. And, we love learning from you and look forward to learning more in the future. But what came out so strongly in all of the presentations that each of you shared today, the first panel as well as this panel, Danielle, Heather, and Dawn, is that self-advocacy. And it's tiring. It's tiring, but as many of you have said, the simplest change is often the most disruptive. And we are here to make change in the lives of people with episodic disabilities as the whole people that they are. And I hope that the two panels and the opening remarks from Jade earlier on today really symbolize the wholeness and the humanness that we'd like from a research, advocacy, policy, practice change, and action, as Giselle said in our session yesterday, for those who were there, in the lives of people living with episodic disabilities. Unfortunately, we won't have time for questions, but Danielle, Heather, and Dawn, please put your contact details, if you're okay with it, in the chat for anyone to reach out to you for questions and who you can connect with.